Hey guys, I'm on the road, as you know, all the time. I'm sitting in an airport in Singapore. And this week, we're talking to Chefrepreneur Jeffrey Zurofsky. We are pleased to welcome our new sponsor, Harry's.com. So you're saying this is not good food?
I mean, you eat it. If your body tells you...
I don't eat this stuff.
Neither do I. But I guess we're two smart guys. No, look at the ingredients. First of all, Michael Pollan's test of like what's in these things, right? And you can't pronounce half of them.
Welcome back to Spartan Up Podcast. We're in the beautiful Amy Barn in Pittsfield, Vermont.
Hey guys, look who I found. Isn't he amazing? Come on, look.
It's amazing, but great. Who the hell are you?
I think we're going to have to go to the tape to find out.
Let's figure it out.
All right.
We are here in Manhattan for Spartan Up Podcast with Jeffrey Zurofsky, the chefrepreneur.
Yep.
Do I have that right?
You got it.
Did you invent that word?
I guess so. You know, I don't know.
What does it mean? What is it?
I mean, the tagline of what I'm doing is adventures from the cutting board to the boardroom. So it's two things. It's inspiring food entrepreneurs who want to learn from people who have actually had accomplishment and success in the business. But actually, and I did a talk on this the other day, it's people taking the lessons from the kitchen and applying them to business, because people don't recognize, you know, similar to the military lessons that are coming out for leadership and for organization, the same stuff exists in the kitchen, and no one's exposed to it
like
yet.
Under pressure, and you've got to make like French onion soup,
and not quite.
And Queen Elizabeth.
There's that, which you know, then you
Right.
you crap your pants and you make sure you get it done, right? But no, it's actually stuff like this term mise en place. You put your stuff in you put your stuff in place, right? And so all this stuff lives in a certain area, and you need that in order to get your job done.
Right.
Stuff like the whole brigade system from the military is the whole kitchen system called brigade came from Napoleonic military, and that's why the Belgian chef coat, the chef coat was the Belgian military coat.
Okay.
Because when Napoleon conquered the Belgians, he said they can't fight but they can cook. So he put the whole Belgian military to feed his armies of 500,000 people.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And he was a big lover of like roast chicken and food and stuff like this. And so, but that stayed, and that became the traditional French kitchen. And that whole system of organization, the hierarchy, the oui chef, the yes chef, that whole...
All came out of that military.
All that came out of that, and it works best. And people don't recognize, like, you can't wing it in the kitchen. If you're going to feed the Queen of England, or you're going to feed 300 people a night in 3 hours...
You've got to have a system.
You've got to have a system.
And I remember I grew up in Queens, and there's a bunch of really hardworking Italian owners that own delis and pizza places and stuff. And the places that did really well, you could see that the team was there super early in the morning, or even the night before, right, and chopping everything and getting everything organized, and they had their place. And the places that were kind of a mess,
they're winging it. There's a thing, you get ready for service, right? There's this whole, like, the best front kitchens are actually the most calm, the most amazingly organized kitchens. Yeah. And the guys who wing it sometimes are very talented, creative. They can put you can do that for a 30-seat restaurant. But we always talk about the difference between food, service, and hospitality. And people forget that hospitality and food are the things that you see. Service is
as
stuff,
a customer.
Yeah, and everyone calls hospitality service, but they're mistaken. Service is the technical aspect of delivering that food to the table, the technical aspect of how you get organized in the kitchen to be able to put out that food. I mean, putting together some of those plates is really complicated, and it's not, and to do it 30, 40 times for a dish every night the same way so that you get it the same as me is not an easy thing.
Same temperature, same layout, same taste.
And then to get it dropped on the table at the right time, to get it dropped on the table with the right part of the dish facing the customer, and everyone on that table getting it, it's not an easy thing.
I find the hardest thing, and I own a restaurant, and I owned a bar in New York years ago we'll talk about, and I have a farm. So,
cool.
So as far as I'm concerned, what your endeavors are the most difficult businesses across any industry. There's nothing more difficult than what you're doing.
Well, thanks. We joke all the time, so there's the famous like fast, cheap, and good pick two. That's the restaurant business's choice. Yep. The other one is we deal with perishable inventory, high cost of goods, high cost of labor. You give me two of those, I can run a business.
But there's another there's a bigger thing as far as I'm concerned, which is you don't know how many customers are coming in tonight.
So you're seeing a lot of restaurants at the high level now change to the ticketing system so they can actually predict their demand. Yeah. But at the end of the day, even that, you got cancellations, you got people, whatever, it's still not easy to predict.
Sure.
We do, if you get you could try to predict and such, but if you get walk-ins, you want to feed those people. And then your reservations get backed up. It's not an easy business. Yeah.
Marianne and I, the woman behind the camera here, we went to a restaurant last night, and food was fine. Took 10 minutes to get somebody to even like recognize us, get us a table, and the place was empty.
Well, that's actually generally happens. So I don't know if you're familiar with like Le Chatelier's principle in physics, but like, you know, the size of the equilibrium of gas in a chamber will expand to the size of the chamber.
Okay.
So when you're really busy, you're probably going to get better service. Right. There's a tipping point, right?
Sure.
So as it gets really compressed and really difficult, you're probably going to get worse. But there's a point where there's a natural equilibrium where that thing is humming. But this moment it's empty or quiet, everyone sort of eases off. And then next thing you know, it's like...
It's funny because we argue at headquarters for Spartan, and I say, I feel like we'd get more work done with less people.
That's Le Chatelier's principle. There's also Parkinson's law in business. There's a great article in The Economist in like the 1960s.
Yeah.
The guy talks about it. It was a military or a understanding of like a military outpost, and it's like the more paperwork got created, with more people, and they got less work done.
Yeah,
and it was about the creation of bureaucracies, and we believe in that. So
yeah, I mean, you got limited space in the kitchen.
well, there's the natural. So one thing we always focus on is the natural triangle. So in a cooking line, there's a triangle that you need to create that is someone's working space.
Like in the kitchen, it would be fridge, stove, sink.
Well, you got fridge underneath, stove, and then in this case, you got the pass where the food goes up. But that natural triangle area where you work. Yeah. If you can create that and get people to actually stay there and not wander off and be able to do all their job within that, you've got energy, you've got humming.
And then that feeds on itself.
Totally.
Right.
And that actually translates to the front of the house because
people are feeling good.
People feel good.
Right.
There's no delays. There's no one like looking around, like where's my food? And then that creates a whole different vibe than I'm focused with you and we're happy to be here, we're excited. And that then translates.
You want to get something done, give it to a busy person. Right.
Right, exactly. I love that. Yeah. I never think about that. That's exactly it. And it's so counterintuitive to the idea of like, we're busy and I can't do any more.
Yeah. It's one more plate.
Yeah.
It's one more plate.
The worst is when you're a line cook, the worst is in the middle of the evening, you're jamming. You're like jamming. And then you put something up because you knew it's not perfect and you try to slide it up in the window and a good chef will throw it back at you. Not throw it literally, but replate this or redo that. And all of a sudden,
everything's off.
Oh, the train just comes to a halt.
Sure.
And your whole mind is like, and so you have to actually learn how to focus and say, I'm just going to absorb that, do that, and move on, as opposed to wigging out about it and getting mad.
We made the mistake. We bought a general store up in Vermont.
Where?
And, right in Pittsfield, right outside of Killington on Route 100. Idyllic, beautiful, old fridge doors. I mean, you'd flip out if you saw
like old school.
It's unbelievable. And the problem is, there's no people. There's only 400 people in town, and so no matter how good you want to make it every day, right? It's hard, and so. Have
you thought about mail order?
Mail order would be amazing. I could keep you on 10 podcasts telling you that story. But we just brought in some partners who ran. The chef was amazing. Couldn't even believe he wanted to move to Vermont. He ran Park Seasons in New York. Remember that restaurant that would change
every format? Yeah.
And he came up, and I ran the place for 10 years. I'm not a restaurateur. I'm not a chef. I'm not right. But I might make the place good. I want people to have good service.
Was it a restaurant or is it a general store?
It's both. Okay. More deli, general store, trying to be restaurant. They came up. 10 years I'm running it. Lost money every single month, right? They were there the first week. They turned it around.
That's amazing.
1 week.
Same number of customers, or they also grew the customer base?
And then all of a sudden the customer base starts growing, and then they just
word gets around.
Yeah, they put a back room in the back that like is a private room, and now people come for dinner. So it's just amazing. The right person that understands whatever the Bermuda kitchen triangle is, right?
Well, it's like me trying to run a race, right? I mean, I'd enjoy it. I'd have fun. I'd come up with all these great ideas, but then you'd look at it and be like, "Oh, no, you got to do this. You got to do that."
Way.
Yeah, and it is that little thing, and that's a little bit about what Chefrepreneur is about: is helping entrepreneurs who may make a mistake.
So if I had reached out to you, or I was reading your blog, I would have learned. I could have saved 10 years.
Not quite yet. I'm working towards it. Just as this is your podcast is going to be a library, a catalog of work about the lessons of performance people.
Sure.
I'd say I'm working on it, and the idea is to get those. There isn't enough resources. When I wanted to become a chef, and I was 18 years old. I've been cooking since I was 8 years old. When I was 18 years old, and I wanted to cook my way through college. I wanted to do that instead of sell suits or run a video store, which is one of my choices. There was no resource. There was one book called Becoming a Chef. Andrew Dornberg and Karen Page wrote it. And it was a story of a couple of chefs and some resources. And it was like, apply to this culinary school, do this. But there was one piece of information there that I took away that was the thing that helped me launch my career, which was, it said, go buy some knives. If you're interested, go buy some knives, get a knife roll, show up at the back door of your favorite restaurant, the best restaurant, and knock on the door and tell them to hire you. And I did that in Chapel Hill, North Carolina Musical School, and that was the guy took me under his wing. And next thing I know, I was off to the races. And 20 years later, I've been running this business. The funny thing is, there was no resources. There's still to this day
make that connection.
Today, there's still no inspirational stories. There's a couple of books out there, Danny Myers. There's a couple other. There's so much entrepreneurship. There's not enough stories around food entrepreneurship, and not just memoirs, but like. How do you do this? And by the way, how do you avoid the mistakes that I've made? Of the ones I've made, like don't do those. Only make new ones. Yeah. And so how do you get?
That's hard to do, right? Because I mean, part of the idea with Spartan Up Podcast is to take all the mistakes I made and try to teach it. But people tend to want to make mistakes.
No, and they need to. You need to, right? But the big ones, you kind of want to avoid, right? Because why? Why do you? I mean, people have ego in this whole like I want to do it myself kind of thing, and I think there's a blend there. But the small ones you got to make because that's the only way you're going to create your unique brand. Whatever it is you want to do.
So the biggest mistake I think people make in life in general that we talk about all the time is the marshmallow test or the cookie test. The story.
What's the remind me?
In the 72, Stanford researcher puts a bunch of kids in rooms, give everybody a marshmallow,
right? That's right.
And people just want instant gratification. Totally. I want it now, and I can't tell you how many operators we had come through that general store that didn't see immediate success and folded, and then Kevin and Katie walk in who are there now, and like I said, they turned the place.
Well, far too many people agreed on the immediate gratification problem is a big issue, especially in my business, right? And I'm sure you were saying before you started Spartan, it's like it could be a hobby pretty quickly, expensive hobby pretty quickly.
Very expensive, yeah.
And you have to take it seriously. And serious means, in my business, it means it's a tactile business. You're not sitting you can't sit in an office somewhere and figure out how to solve all these problems. You have to be in the store. Right. You have to be in the restaurant. You have to know all the positions.
While you're dealing with, your rapid fire.
Yeah, I won't hire people to run my restaurants who aren't excited about also being the porter for a day or 2 or 3 or 5 because sometimes the garbage.
Somebody got to take the garbage out.
Garbage got to get taken every day, and if the guy doesn't show up, which happens, you got to be okay doing that. So it is a very tactile business, and it isn't immediate gratification. Now, the one thing we get in our business, and I'm sure you get it at the end of a race, is the feeling of giving service to that customer is powerful. Yeah. And that has its own gratification. That's the one thing that we kept us going every night when we're running restaurants is, did they like it, right? And so you're getting that.
Feeds you.
Yeah, but you're not getting that's your own version of success. It's an intrinsic one, not an extrinsic one. So, I mean, sometimes getting an article in the paper or review is great, but only in service of the business.
Let's take a break. We'll go to Wichcraft, your place.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll grab a sandwich and we'll come right back.
Sounds awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.
I hope you're not sitting still while you listen. If you are, you better get a burpee break in.
With all the traveling I do, and I'm traveling right now, I leave razors everywhere. It gets so damn expensive to replace them. I just got my first Harry's delivery, and I got the best shave I've had in a long time at an amazing price. Harry's.com was started by 2 guys passionate about creating a better shaving experience for all men. Shipping is free, and the blades go from their German factory straight to your door at factory direct prices. So go to Harry's.com now, and Harry's will give you $5 off if you type in my code SpartanUp with your first purchase. That's HARRYS.com and enter coupon code SpartanUp at checkout for $5 off the starter set and start shaving smarter today.
Sandwich was awesome.
That was awesome.
Yeah. What's this place, Live Bait? We passed that.
That was one of the first places I worked in New York City because when I came up from North Carolina to get a job, I wanted to work at some of the great restaurants here, but no one would take you. Not because they just don't know you. And if you worked in Chapel Hill, even if you worked at a great restaurant there, I worked at a mobile 4-star restaurant.
Who are you?
Yeah, who are you, right? Like there's now 24,000 restaurants. There was about 10,000 back in the day.
So go backwards for a second.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about this Michelin thing, and now you just said mobile.
Mobile was a similar, so I guess, a similar rating. It's a lot more on...
So Michelin rates
restaurants all in France.
What's the top rating?
3 stars Michelin. If you get 3 stars Michelin...
You're done.
You're golden, right? It's an amazing thing.
Right.
And until the last 5 years, they didn't do it outside of France. and it was based as a travel guide initially, right?
Got it.
Michelin was a way of
I saw the
selling
movie.
tires.
What's the movie? 100 Steps or something?
Yeah.
I saw that movie. That's how I know about
Michelin.
Michelin.
So then Mobile was a different rating system,
Right.
and they got into the business too as travel guides, mostly in the U.S.
Okay.
And their idea was, and they had 5 stars, and there was a lot of like bed and breakfast and such like that. So this was a great restaurant. Been around for 20 years, but by the time I got there, chef was a really talented chef.
It's a very high ranking.
Yeah, and we kicked it every night. Like it was amazing.
Yeah.
I come up here, I was like,
No one knows you.
What's that place?
Right.
And now everyone knows it, but like it didn't matter.
Right.
And besides, doing 120 covers a night in that restaurant versus doing 400 or 500 that
In New York.
with the New York Times coming in, to
Right.
review, totally different.
Sure.
So they just said, just get a job anywhere. Put New York on your resume, and then let everything push down. I was
So
like,
you
okay.
found Live Bait.
So Live Bait. Someone gave me a connection to Live Bait. It's an oyster bar. It's bar, oyster, burgers. And I go in thinking I've worked at Mobile 4-star, and I go in there and it's like burgers and aioli, mayonnaise and fries and stuff like this. It's like I can do this. And the chef goes, "Okay, you want to get online for lunch?" I get upstairs in line for lunch. It's this tiny little line, and the orders start coming in, and I'm blowing up. Like I can't keep up.
Right.
And he's just laughing, and then he's like, he gets the real cook on. He goes, "Go help him out." And that was my indoctrination into the fact that if you're going to work in New York City, you're going to...
Whole different scale.
It's a whole different scale.
Yeah.
The pace, the volume, the
Yeah.
quality has got to be there. And that's not a place that would be rated, but still cranking that out is a totally different animal.
So you take someone, your point, you take someone out of New York, they can pretty much do it.
You can. You still got to run the business. And I always advise any chef getting into the business, if you haven't work the front of the house, you got to work the front of the house. If you don't have a business
Gotta know the
partner,
whole business.
get a real business partner
Yeah.
because you want to focus on food. You want to be creative. You want to get the food out. You want to be the guy talking to the press. You want to be talking about food. You don't have to be worrying about the other stuff. And you can have a smaller slice of the bigger pie.
Switch gears, let's talk about farming. So I was super excited about this idea of tying together the general store with the farm, with the weddings, right?
Yep.
You're going to get married up at the place. You come out with your bride. You look at the farm. We grow the food right there. We've got the animals.
You do all the catering, everything.
It just all makes sense, right? It's perfect rotational system. We would do rotational grazing, so it was all free-range animals,
everything, yeah.
grass-fed. And it would be easier to put someone on the moon than to make that work. Because
It seems that way.
Yeah, because no one really wants to farm. I
Right.
think it sounds super sexy.
Well, it depends. So right now we're seeing a lot of farmerpreneurs as well, right? We're seeing the largest growth in. So go back 80 years ago, there were 5.6 million family farms in the U.S. There are now 1.6 million.
Right.
That's been consolidation, big ag, all this other stuff, right? This is the first year we've seen a growth in the number of small farms in 80 years. That's all coming from 6 to 20 acre farms, husband and wives who want to go back to the land and do something interesting with it. Grow hops, have bees make honey, do small, chickens, like all organic Bluefoot chickens, stuff like this. So we're seeing that happen. So you can find someone. The question is, what do they do in the off season, right? If you got 90 inches of snow up there.
We got a lot of snow.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do and how do you occupy yourself? There's a great guy up in Maine, Elliot Coleman. I don't know if you know him.
I know the name.
Yeah, 4-season farming.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable. Talk about a guy.
Makes
you
it
can't get him
happen.
off his farm, by the way. The guy's been, he won't go. So we actually tried to get him down to New York to help us advise us on something, and he's like,
Wouldn't do it.
won't do it. You can come to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're seeing people come to it. It is not easy. They're few and far between, but you're seeing people. What you got to do is, I think, let them have the inspiration of what that's going to look like.
Sure.
So if you have the model already, then maybe you need to let them play. I think you got to go hyper local. You got to think about, can you create a sustainable business on that farm without the events, without the catering, based on the products you're growing there? So what do you charge for grass-fed beef, right? And where are you slaughtering it?
Well, we figured the only way to really do it is to service through the CSA model, where people pay $500-$700 for the year, and then we deliver every week. You go to Boston, it's 2.5 hours away. Drop off, maybe have 1,000 CSAs.
I would say, well, I guess you got a population density problem.
The bigger problem is, and I've experienced this in business since I'm 10 years old. Not a lot of people really want to work. I'm sure at your restaurants, you might hire 5 to get 1 or 10 to get 1, right?
Or it's right now it's 10 to interview 1.
How could that be? Sorry. That was the guy that wants the job.
I would say nowadays in New York City, where it used to be 5 to get 1, it's interview 10. So look at 10 resumes to interview 1 to get 1/10 of one.
Wow.
So
you got to do 10 interviews.
1% of our
So you look at 100 resumes, you interview 10 people, you get 1 person.
That's about the ratio right now.
Yeah, and so imagine if you're running a farm up in Vermont.
Yeah.
And you're going through that process, and I literally got to get people up, and now we have some great farmers finally that are there, and they're kicking butt, but the shame in it is it's the right thing to do, right? Can you imagine food off the farm, free range?
Well, let's. I mean, we want to have a conversation. That's multiple podcasts.
Yeah.
Our food system is completely broken, and part of it is, and this is.
Oh, I got to move in.
Yeah, and part of it is, I mean, we could get into this on a policy side. You're up against forces that you don't even know about. You're talking $17 billion of subsidies that go to American farmland, $13 billion of which go to 4 companies for 4 products.
Wow.
So if you're a farmer, right, you can't make it selling. Right now, broccoli is more expensive than fuel made from corn because farmers are making corn that also gets into the feed and all this other stuff.
Right.
You can't. Broccoli should be cheaper.
Yeah, right.
But it can't be because nobody's
doing it.
There's no subsidies for broccoli.
Right.
1% of the whole subsidy system, by the way, goes to specialty crops. Specialty crops is anything that's green, basically.
And what do you think? Because I've seen
so that's what you're up against, by the way. Yeah.
Forks over knives and King Corn and
Food Inc. and all that.
Even with that movement, but the bulk of it, like you said, is all the process stuff, the military way of farming.
Part of it is, and I'm not trying to. I don't want to be someone who's like, oh, back in the day it was so much better, right? It's not that. It's the fact that we've created something now from a food system that doesn't look like food anymore. People don't touch the food, right? Yeah. And we're talking. There's hope. Like I said, small family farms are growing again, but also number of farmers markets has doubled in the last 10 years.
Nothing like going to a farmer's market, right?
That's the greatest. You get to know your community, you get to know the person. I mean, the relationship. So I'm on the board of Grow and OIC, which runs all the farmers markets here in New York City. Okay. When we started 40 years ago, there was 1. About 15 years ago, there was only about 20. We now have 53.
Nice.
The largest independent cilantro farmer in the Northeast grows and sells in Washington Heights in New York. And he's a Polish guy, and he grows cilantro, and it's all he sells. He sells it in Washington Heights because it's better and less expensive cilantro than buying at the grocery store for the community up there.
Wow.
And he's built this relationship with all these people, these restaurants, the regulars. And we think there's a huge economy there that has been developed, but it takes some time.
It takes time.
If you think about the 200-mile radius of New York City, and you think about the demand for 8 million people in the city and all the restaurants that need to be supplied, we don't need to get our stuff shipped in from California except for out-of-season lemons and stuff like that.
I got a farm in Vermont.
The big issue is that current GMOs that are being grown in labs for the purpose are becoming pesticide and herbicide enabling technologies. Right. That's the key, right? They're not
I was actually at the original Monsanto and Delta and Pineland meetings in like the early 90s. And it was all about the sprays.
Well, so they sell approximately 5 to 6 to 1 of what they sell in seed.
Right.
I personally, and I'm maybe a little iconoclastic in this, I don't care about the issue of the seed, and I agree with all the people who think about abundance and feeding the world and feeding the 9 billion. I'm worried about you can have those seeds and still grow organically, grow naturally, but to enable spray, which lasts in the supply chain for multiple iterations, it's causing cancer, diabetes, non-contagious diseases. The 4 major ones are all coming, we know, from toxicology in our system. Our immunity is broken. We're not getting enough. Forget about eating more kale. It's like stop eating the crap that is processed and carrying all this toxicology. Forget about. I mean,
problem is it's at your fingertips, right? You're hungry, and
it's been subsidized. I mean, we could talk politics all day long. If you're an independent Tea Party person, you should be outraged at the amount of subsidies that go to 4 companies to enable their businesses to then create $1 trillion health crisis.
Yeah,
like that's what's gone on.
How do you stop it?
I think this is a bit of an idealism. I think you got small farms, 700 acres or larger even. They need to organize. Someone needs to use, if you want to use technology to organize farming, like forget about better systems for creating farming, you need to organize and create almost a small farm lobby that goes and says, you know what, we want to fight for our rights. there's 1% of the subsidy system comes to green vegetables. What if that was doubled to 2%?
Right.
You know, they would be double their amount of the business. What if we did away with subsidies altogether and went back to just a system of crop insurance so that when it snows or rains or, you know, tornadoes and such wipe out, people have, there's a great Planet Money podcast about the $1 million farmers in Iowa. And these guys were then...
I think, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good piece
yeah.
because it didn't like blame the farmers. It was just like the system exists, so they're going to take advantage of it. Why wouldn't they?
Sure.
There's also this issue, if you want to tie it back to sort of like health and wellness and productivity and like what you do, you can't run a race if you're not thinking about the type of food, the fuel you're putting in your body.
Right.
And if you're a kid growing up in New York City and you're going to school, you can't think about math if the stuff you're being fed is not good fuel.
No, that's right.
And so our future relies upon it, and it's a little bit of something that's being, you know, created by our own government. And I think there's an issue there. And I think
it all, in my opinion, all goes back to the cookie test. It's just, it's easier.
It's easier.
It's faster, right? Nobody wants to do the work.
You want to talk to someone here, Marion Nessel, Food Politics, right? She's amazing, but her whole fight is against all the marketing initiatives and all the labeling of all that stuff on food.
Right.
And you're a kid, you're going down the aisle, you're with your mom, and you're like, I want the Cookie Crunch, you know, the Captain Crunch or whatever. And mom's like, okay, I got to fight this fight, or I'm just going to get him Captain Crunch.
Yeah,
and to your point about the cookie and the marshmallow, it's the same thing.
I have the fights. I know, and then what happens is, in my opinion, normal becomes worse every year.
Oh, it
just keeps working in the wrong direction, because then your family, the adults, are saying, "What's the big deal? Let them have some. Do we really need to have this fight?"
My partner Tom Clicchio and his wife, they put together a film called A Place at the Table, which talks about hunger in America. And what was really fascinating is hunger and obesity are the same, opposite sides of the same coin, which is this supply chain, right?
Sure.
And you'd be surprised that where hunger, we think of hunger as you know, kids in the street or homeless people in the street in New York City, which is prevalent. Hunger is all across it's rampant. People who have 2 jobs who can't afford real food,
right?
And you know, the amount of support systems across the country in, like you're saying, cowboys, ranchers, like rural areas, it's amazing. Yet they could just grow their own food.
Let's end it with this. I suggest we just put a policy in that says, I like Bloomberg, right? Let's just cut out junk food completely. It's not allowed anymore because, and everybody's going to hate me for this, but human beings cannot make the right decisions.
I agree with you. We're not capable of making good decisions. A, we don't have the right information. B,
7 out of 8 doctors recommend Marlboro or cigarettes. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Well, if you want to talk about it, and I think this is another thing, the EMF, like the whole, right now everyone's talking about the studies. Well, 40 years ago the studies were saying cancer, you know, smoking didn't cause cancer, right? Or 50 years ago. And everyone's like, no.
As soon as I wake up, I'm on the phone. I've got the phone next to my head, and that's terrible.
Well, there's the Wi-Fi, there's the Bluetooth, you know, you want to use all the Fitbits, all the stuff.
Vermont is starting to sound really good.
It's starting to sound great.
You got to open a Wichcraft in our town.
You said there's 400 people. That's not going to do it. We have
you do 1 sandwich a week. That was awesome.
That was great.
We're going to do that's part 1. We're going to do 10 parts.
I'm just so excited to be sharing the microphone with a fellow neologist. It's a rare treat. Chefrepreneur, love it. Yeah. But Johnny, I forgot who we are. Who are we, Johnny?
Who we are. That's right. Now everyone knows who you are, which is fantastic. So I'm Johnny Waite. To my right is Sephra.
Pleasure.
And you'll notice Sephra has 1 name. She's special that way. The rest of us have 2.
Like,
he has 3. Colonel Tim Nye. But it's all about you. It's not about us.
And it's also about Marion.
Oh, and Marion, the magic Marion behind the camera.
Yeah.
So, fantastic.
Great interview. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've talked to them about permaculture. Maybe you're aware of it, but like the permaculture design principles, I don't think they still know what it is. But
thank you for
throwing you guys
having
under the
confidence in me that I can't keep up. Thanks. Thank you.
No, but they talk about efficiency in design, right? And it's saying like if you need to toast bread for one of your dishes and the toaster's like halfway on the other side of the kitchen, like you don't think it's a big deal, but you actually rack that up and your chef's walking an extra couple miles at the end of and so it's just like those little efficiencies that you can design into your life, into your business, into the kitchen that really can make all the difference and can.
Well, one of the things we see, that's interesting you should say, we've seen now in technology, we've seen lean startup, right? And I always say restaurants are the original lean startup because they have to be efficient, things have to be compact, things you test things. You put dishes on the menu, you get feedback immediately, then you change that dish. It's kind of like putting out a beta product as opposed to, baking the whole thing. And you're actually seeing this now. GE is doing lean manufacturing for the same reason, because spending $200 million to build a factory and 5 years of design development is just wasteful. Meanwhile, now they're doing it in small tests, and that's what a good restaurant is. A good restaurant is just testing all the time. And it's the original lean startup as far as I'm concerned.
When you're talking about the design of the kitchen, I was thinking, and you talked a lot about the military mindset somewhat in the kitchen, but the military has load plans, and whether it's a rucksack or whether it's your Humvee or whether it's a tank or whatever, over time you learn how to pack that item or that, so a rucksack, and everyone's rucksack in a particular unit should be packed identically, so that if you pick up the wrong one, or, God forbid, the guy in front of you goes down or whatever, you grab them. You reach inside and it's pitch dark. You know exactly where to reach.
I love that. I love that.
It's the outside pocket, the middle pocket is your poncho, then your socks next to that, your first aid kit. All of those things, so that you don't have to say, well, where does Johnny put his stuff, and start rooting through it. It's right there. You get into the Humvee, you know exactly where the ammo cans are. You know exactly, again.
I can't tell you.
But that's very regimented, and people inspect it, and you inspect it to be, right?
Yeah.
Expect it.
I can't tell you how many times.
Thank you.
Expected. We just neologized right here live on camera.
I can't tell you how many times I've walked onto someone else's station, because if you work the night shift, someone's working lunch.
Right.
You walk on the same station, and it's a mess. You're like, why is the guy's basil over here? Why is this over here? And you spend a half an hour doing that, and then forget about efficiency, forget about giving good customer service, because at that point you're just screaming in your head about this guy, and if everyone had the same way of doing it and someone set the standard for that, and in great kitchens that is the case. I worked in a kitchen as a stage early on. It was one of the best kitchens in New York City.
May I ask what a stage is?
A stage is a short-term time frame you work somewhere to learn, basically, kind of like an apprenticeship.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Sous chef.
And the reason why that got its name is back to the French. It was an étage. It meant a stage. It was a stage in your learning. And in this case, I worked at one of the best restaurants in New York. It was for a very short period of time. And in between lunch service and dinner service, we had these copper island stoves that we would polish and then wrap in plastic wrap, and before the dinner guys came in, and then they would come in 5 minutes later and take it all off. But the reason why we did that was significant, not because of protecting it for those 5 minutes. It was the fact that we were handing it off and saying, this is done.
Pristine.
It's pristine. We've left it in the same condition we found it.
Right.
And that kind of system, and that was one of the best restaurants in the world at the time. It was one of the best restaurants in New York City, and there's a reason for that.
Right, because like anything else, they had a standard.
They had a standard, and that standard was met every day, no matter who you were.
Right.
Yeah. You were.
Very, very much like our podcast. We have a standard. It's the exact same every time. We never go off script. Honestly, I don't know the French word for it, but I think it's magnifique.
C'est bon, yeah.
People the pitch. I'll drop a pitch.
Before you,
I had to do it once.
Before you take us out, okay? Because I thought that's where you were going there.
I was, but I'll let you.
No, because Jeff is big on his French words, and I know off camera he was telling me the history of the croissant.
No, you're not doing this. You're not going there.
I was wondering,
Marion, do you want to help us out there?
That's all right.
Perfect. Thank you for listening to another epic story of success. For show notes, video, and audio of this episode, visit SpartanUpPodcast.com/062 or follow us on Twitter at SpartanUpPod. The Spartan Up Podcast is brought to you by Spartan.
To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.